Okay, before this video actually starts, I just realized this as I was about to start editing. Okay, so this kind of video I'm about to do, I couldn't get clips of RWBY. And the reason I'm afraid to show clips of RWBY is because I am afraid this is going to be taken down due to copyright. So there's definitely going to be more clips of Call of Duty Zombies than there should be, which I am sorry for. It's not that I like zombies better than RWBY. It's the fact that when people do talking about storyline videos and character videos, it's easier to show footage of the Call of Duty Zombies characters, considering most people have recorded their own footage or have shown footage from cutscenes, but they give credit to the full user. It's basically easier if I get footage of Call of Duty Zombies more so than RWBY. So for that, I'm sorry you guys aren't seeing as much RWBY footage, and that's my biggest regret for this. So since that's out of the way, enjoy this video. Okay, you're right about the idiot part. Second of all, we are doing a video that I got an idea of that may sound extremely stupid. We are comparing the RWBY characters to the Call of Duty zombie characters. And before you ask why, one, I thought it'd be a fun idea to make, comparing these characters, and two, I feel like in a few more aspects that the RWBY characters and the Call of Duty characters are the same. Now, to be more specific with you, we are mostly focusing on the crew we were introduced to starting at Numa onwards. So I'll get to that in a moment. First of all, let's address you to Team RWBY. For those of you who don't know, RWBY is an animated show, or anime, I suppose you can also call it, made by Rooster Teeth. And it's a very good anime, I would highly recommend it. But basically, right, we have Team RWBY, of Ruby Rose, Weiss Schnee, I always afraid I'm going to mispronounce their names, Blake Belladonna, and Yang Xiaolong, right? They make Team RWBY, because RWBY. And yes, I know, it's supposed to be filled with you, but the show did that on purpose. I don't know. They are huntresses hunting these things called Grimm, right? And have other storylines later on. Up next, we have the characters you guys are probably not as familiar with, the Call of Duty Zombies characters. More specifically, we have Tank Dempsey, Nikolai Valinsky, Takeo Misaki, and Edward Richtofen, or Richtofen, depending on how you want to pronounce his last name. The way we're going to compare these characters, right, is seeing how they evolve over time. And what I mean by that is, 1.0 versions of these characters, which was later called that, are different than the ones we were introduced to Origins. Look at the difference! Not only do they have these guys have a new look, but they have a new personality. And as time grew on, the RWBY characters got more personality and more of a character change. So right, I'm going to start off with Volume 1 RWBY characters, as how we were first introduced to Team RWBY, as how we were introduced to the Call of Duty Zombies characters from Numa up until Origins. Well, technically, you know what I mean. Alright, so why don't we compare the first characters? This one was probably the easiest to come up with, alright? But I honestly feel like you can compare Takeo Misaki to Weiss Schnee. First of all, first reason, they are both good at single sword combat. Takeo was trained in the Japanese Special Forces and was a Japanese officer, trained in the way of the samurai. In fact, he was so good he became a special agent of the Emperor, as we find out later in the events of Setsubo no Shima technically. I'll get to that more later on. And Weiss is extremely good with a rapier sword. I forget the exact name of it because I'm an idiot. And is very good at that along for dust magic. Is it magic or is it just dust? I'm just going to call it dust for now. Anyway, not only are they good at that, but Takeo and Weiss both have a high sense of self-pride and honor. Sure, you can say Takeo is more focused on the honor of his homeland, but it's still pretty high as well as Weiss's pride. And even... Now this is the one... Before I get into this, I'm sorry if you guys are going to be offended by this next statement, alright? But Takeo and Weiss were the least liked characters of their team. Now listen, I know some people would disagree with the Weiss part, but I think a lot of people would agree with the Takeo part, considering that his character to some people was extremely stereotypical. But I honestly feel like Weiss was the least popular among the Team RWBY members. And when you specifically ask that people for Call of Duty characters, well, the Zombies crew, they won't say Takeo as often as they would say Nikolai or Edward. And for RWBY, I feel like more people recognize RWBY, Yang, and Blake more than they recognize Weiss. Keep in mind, this is Volume 1 RWBY characters as well as 1.0 characters. So that's what I feel like when it comes to Takio and Weiss. Those two are comparable in that way. And yes, that does change later on in the series for both Call of Duty and Zombies. But that's what I think of 1.0 compared to Volume 1, Weiss and Takio. Up next we got a semi-more difficult one, Yang. Now Yang was a hard one because all these characters besides Takio were extremely funny. So, cutting out the funny aspect for a moment here, I had to pick a character who also represented the badassness of Yang. And there was only one person I could have gone with this, 1.0 Dempsey. Dempsey is a badass American Marine, right? And the reason I picked Dempsey over, say, Nikolai Edward is because Nikolai's just a comic relief character, to be honest, and Rick Hoffman is more of the sinister leader, so to speak. So I think Dempsey and Yang fit in this aspect. They always make puns, sort of, well, they're always making you laugh. Both don't mind a shotgun or two, and both don't mind fighting close quarters that much. Plus, again, the badassness is there for both Tank and Yang. Honestly, there's not more to say to this comparison of Volume 1 Dempsey and Volume 1 Yang. However, I will say this, just to get this part out of the way. Later on, these characters got a rework, right? But I still feel like that version of Dempsey, which was later called, I want to say that one is Primus Dempsey, or Ultimus Dempsey actually, because I'll get into Black Ops 4 in a bit later, and Yang are still pretty much comparable in those aspects. Sure, Dempsey loses humor, but so do the rest of the characters, but he's still probably one of the most badass characters in the Call of Duty Zombies franchise. And I still think Yang is the most badass out of Team RWBY. Alright, moving on then. So, this next one was kind of obvious for leadership-wise, but other than that, there wasn't much more I can say about Ruby Rose. Now, besides that, who does she connect with more between Nikolai and Richtofen? And I had to obviously pick Richtofen. For one, the leadership is still there. In the 1.0 version, right? Richtofen's the leader of this group as they go through the adventures of Kino der Toten, Ascension, Shangri-La, and Moon. Alright? That's the order they go in. And yes, I know people will say they also went to Call of the Dead before Shangri-La, but we were more interested to the celebrity cast in that map, while those guys were all locked in a room. Anyway, besides the leadership, right? Richtofen and Ruby both have very funny quirks about them. Sure, people would say that Richtofen was more evil, and he was, and Ruby's not that evil. But honestly, comparing Nikolai to Ruby, there's less common ground between those two, if I'm being perfectly honest. Now, and they're also big fans of their weaponry. What do I mean by that? Ruby has been shown to be a big fan of weaponry like her Crescent Rose, which is a sniper rifle scythe. And Richtofen's very interested in his weaponry, such as the ray gun, the thunder gun, and the Wunderwaffle, which were all inventions of his own. And Ruby's weapon was also an invention of her own. Okay, the thunder gun probably wasn't an invention of Richtofen, but still. Excuse me a moment. Sorry about that. Anyway, there's not much more to say between Volume 1 Ruby and Volume 1 Richtofen besides their leadership, their quirks, and they're both fond for weaponry. Yes, I know some people wouldn't say that the evil part is not the best, but hey, it's better than comparing her to Nikolai. Speaking of Nikolai, I assume people would get the idea that Nikolai Blensky and Blake Belladonna are kind of comparable. Besides the humor, and Nikolai being more iconic, as well as Blake, but not as much as the others, there's not much to say besides the fact that Nikolai is a big fan of close range like shotguns, and Blake with her twin swords. These are the characters that just stick to themselves for the most part. Honestly, there's not much more I can say. Blake was probably the hardest one. I debated back and forth between comparing Blake to Takio because of their swordsmanship and their standalone, but I thought Weiss was a better fit. So this one was just kind of like, okay, this was the hard one. I guess I have to find good reason she's comparable to Nikolai. But honestly, you can say that about any of these RWBY characters. Keep in mind, this is mostly my opinion from what I understand. I should have said at the beginning of the video, and I apologize for that. But other than that, that's just the 1.0 and Volume 1 characters, right? Now you might be asking what's the difference between this and later known as the Ultimus crew, aka Dimension 63 until Black Ops 4. Okay, so this crew was introduced in the map Origins from Black Ops 2, which came after Mob of the Dead, right? And as you can see, they got a complete rework of looks and personality. Richtofen became less evil, Takeo became more of a badass, Nikolai became more serious and less drunk, and Dempsey lost his humor. Then again, so did all the characters. So this kind of changes the perspective of how the characters compare to the RWBY characters. And as we move on with the RWBY characters, they have also changed. So why don't we go ahead and compare this Ultimus crew compared to the RWBY characters up to Volume 6 and 5. Alright, sound good? Great. So as the new development changed, Takeo himself became more of a badass character compared to his 1.0 self. So I don't think Weiss and Takeo are comparable at this point. Who do I think they're comparable to? Blake! Okay. So to be more specific, right? Blake in the series, spoiler alert, later found out that he was a member of the White Fang, which is pretty much, from what I remember, is the bad guys of Team RWBY. As for Takeo, in the maps The Rising Drac and Setsubo no Shima, Takeo finds out that his whole life was also a big lie. The Emperor pretty much sentenced that version of Takeo that he had to kill to die. But shockingly enough, that he didn't die by the Emperor's hands, he more so died by Takeo's hands. Besides that, they both became more of a badass characters. Both were pretty great swordsmen, as you guys have seen or have not seen from Takeo's origin trailers. I'll be sure to remember to play a clip here of when people first saw Takeo in that Origins trailer, because my god, it was amazing. So that's pretty much the only real differences between why Blake is more like Takeo. So, as I said earlier, Yang and Dempsey are pretty much the same because of their badassery and whatnot. However, in the Rising Drac, there was a good change in Dempsey, right? In the Rising Drac, and most of the other maps in Black Ops 3, you had to kill the 1.0 versions of themselves. And Dempsey didn't really want to do it at first until Richtofen explained what was going to happen, right? And then at that point, before Richtofen can pull the switch on Dempsey's cryopod, yes, I know, be sure to put a visual so you guys understand what I'm saying. Dempsey decided to do it himself. He took the responsibility of killing his former self into his own hands for what he thought was the greater good. And to be honest, we all thought that when it came to the Black Ops 3 maps. This found a new respect in Dempsey, as founded by Richtofen. I did not mean to turn my Xbox on. And Yang also had like a character change when she lost her right arm to Adam. Now I know I'm mentioning Volume 5 stuff and whatnot, but I'm trying to keep as most of it out as I can. So besides those big revelations in these characters, which replaces the humor aspect, the badassery is still there. Alright, on to the next one. Now the big question is, do I still compare RWBY to Richtofen? And this is even a better case. Since Richtofen is no longer considered evil by this standard in his version, he's more considered the guy who's just trying to do the right thing. In Origins, right, he wants to help Samantha and Maxis, and as well as the Giant trailer where he kills his former self, who was the evil Richtofen in his eyes, which we later find out in Blood of the Dead, from a quote he said to Takeo. Now, yes, Richtofen is still the leader at this point. Keep in mind I said at this point. And RWBY is also a leader of Team RWBY, and that's probably still going to be the same throughout all of RWBY unless RWBY dies. Which I highly doubt unless they plan that to be the series finale, but you never know. So besides the leadership aspect, these people still are interested in their weaponry and still interested in certain things. RWBY is still interested in her weaponry and finding out what her silver eyes are all about, while Richtofen is still also focused on the effects of element 115, which was later called the Vinium. And that means, yes, Blake and Nikolai are still somewhat the same. Not Blake and Nikolai, what am I thinking? Blake's Takeo now, in my opinion. Weiss and Nikolai are more comparable at this aspect, right? Because this got a chance to show more of the badass side of Nikolai, as well as Weiss getting a chance to show off what she's made of. These characters both advanced more so for good, considering that Nikolai lost his drunk state, and Weiss became more of an icon in Team RWBY and stood out more. Sure, Weiss still has her attitude, and Nikolai still has his self-preservation. But other than that, not much has really changed in this aspect. I still compare the characters similarly because they're big changes and revelations in themselves, and the fact that they're showing off more of their badass side, less of their humor side. Okay, right, so there's one more comparison we have to make with these zombies characters, and that's up to Black Ops 4. And Blood of the Dead, because something major happens for Blood of the Dead, and this is the huge spoiler warning I was talking about. Because of the ending to the Blood of the Dead Easter egg. So stick with me, as I'm gotta explain the context of Blood of the Dead. So, in Blood of the Dead, this takes place in an altered cycle timeline between Setsubo Noshima and Gorod Krovi. They go to Alcatraz to get these blood vials, which are considered an insurance policy for what we assumed was for their encounter with Dr. Monty at Revelations. However, something changed. I don't know, no one really knows what changed it besides they are at a different location compared to the comics, which caused them to be late. And because they were late, this book called the Chronorium changed. And Richtofen talks about how he needs their blood for some reason. And we do not know. They couldn't talk about this more often because that's when the zombies were coming. So they tried to escape. However, the Warden, also known as Brutus, breaks the portal, trapping them at Alcatraz. And thus the rest of Blood of the Dead is played out, and you solve the Easter egg. It is later revealed in the final boss fight that there is this machine that powers the island, and is preventing them from escaping. So after dealing with the Warden, they have to wonder what they had to do next. To which Richtofen puts himself in this machine, inevitably trapping himself and draining his blood. This is where the post-Revelations Richtofen comes out, which is the Richtofen that we were discussing earlier. And in that, they beat the Warden once and for all, and then that version of Richtofen gets rid of the blood vials and leaves the other Richtofen so that the others can escape. This is where the huge character development takes place, especially for Nikolai. So, as Primus Richtofen dies, Ultimus Richtofen gives Nikolai the Chronorium, and he reads his new destiny. Learns that he has a different path. And this is part of the reason I think that Nikolai is kind of turning into Ruby Rose in this sense, because he is now becoming the leader of our zombies crew. If you think about it. Because with Richtofen out of the way, and Nikolai's the only other character to read the Chronorium. And the big reason for that is because the events of Gorod Krovi hadn't happened, and he didn't kill his 1.0 self. So whatever's going to happen to Nikolai, we're not sure quite yet. But it slowly felt like at this point, that version of Nikolai was becoming more like Ruby Rose in the leader aspect, and that they know they have to do the right thing once and for all. Now, there wasn't a lot of humor in Blood of the Dead. It was mostly filled with sadness and a fear of survival. But in the trailer, you can see these characters fighting with everything they have. So, Dempsey and Yang, by the way, oddly enough, I can still consider them very similar. Because both of them would do anything, even if it means sacrificing a part of themselves. Keep in mind that the trailer does not indicate what really happened to Dempsey, right? Dempsey is left completely bloodied after a brutal encounter with the zombies. Some people thought he was dying. I wasn't really sure, to be honest. But it took a lot out of him, and just like when Yang fought Adam and lost her arm. They both got seriously hurt, but wanted to do anything to keep someone safe, and keep themselves alive. As for Takeo, do I still think Takeo and Weiss are somewhat similar? Not really. I consider Takio kind of going back into Blake, where he's going to become the irrelevant one, sort of the team. That's not me saying that Blake is going to become irrelevant, alright? Because in the trailer, you see Takio go one-on-one with this warden, and he just completely annihilates him. I think Blake has become like the lone wolf and has become crazy. So Blake is also becoming her own lone wolf. I doubt she'll go crazy, but she became her own lone wolf after discovering she was a member of the White Fang. We don't know if Blake's going to have that much more interaction with Team RWBY, but at this point in the trailer, right, Takio has become a completely different person than his honorable self. He's become a lone wolf, kinda like Blake. And no, I am not saying that just because Blake is a funness. So, Weiss and Primus Richthofen. They both come to the realization that they have to do the right thing in a way. With Richthofen finally sacrificing himself and Weiss unleashing what I consider is going to be her true potential. Now this is going to be very interesting to see how both of these series continue to grow, and so on and so forth. With Richthofen, this version of Richthofen have dying, it's going to be interesting to see what fourth member they bring in to this new crew to try to fill that hole. But getting back to Richthofen and Weiss, not only are they both trying to do the right thing, they both are trying to focus on themselves in a way. Weiss, considering Weiss is doing her own thing, Blake and RWBY are seen, not Blake and RWBY, Yang and RWBY are seen doing their things together. It pretty much shouts to me that these two are trying to do their own thing. While Richthofen's trying to survive, he had to come to the realization that he had to die. So guys, I know this wasn't the best kind of video for me to do, and it may sound like I didn't know what I was talking about, but keep in mind, right? When I wanted to do this, I knew it was going to be a challenge. I knew it was going to be a video that a lot of people were probably going to disagree with. But most of it was my opinion from what I interpret. Okay? You are more than welcome to disagree with this video. And if you do, tell me who you think the RWBY characters remind you of the Zombies characters. Alright? I would love to hear what you guys have to say about this. Because keep in mind, I am not an expert on RWBY or Call of Duty Zombies. If you want a Call of Duty Zombies expert, go check out Rad Austin. He's the guy I enjoy watching him talk about the storylines, and in fact when he explains the ending of these Easter eggs. Which is where I went to understand the Blood of the Dead Easter egg. If you want more so of a RWBY expert, right, you can go look at the Max of Future 8 or Your Only Mate, considering these guys discuss RWBY Volume 6 in particular as of lately. Those two I would recommend if you want to hear more about the RWBY discussions. And yes, I know there's a lot more Zombies YouTubers such as Mr. Dalek JD and Mr. Raffle Waffles who also talk about the Call of Duty Zombies storyline, and some others I keep forgetting. But Rad Austin was the one I've been familiar with the most out of most of them, so I would definitely recommend checking out Rad Austin as well as Max of Future 8 and Your Only Mate. But that's been my 2 cents about comparing this video, and also let me know if you guys want me to do more of these videos talking about opinions. And also, if you guys want me to make a response video to people or something like that, because I enjoy these kind of videos where I just talk for a while, because it's interesting to express your opinions of people who are just finding you and they're hearing what you have to say. Again, most of this was just my opinion, and you are more than welcome to disagree with it, and just let me know why you disagree. And then we'll have a good discussion about it, and I will probably admit that you're right because you probably have done more research for who knows how longer than I have. I thank you all for watching this video, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.